I'm Jim Kircher. On a program like this one, there are a lot of people who come to town or who live and work here that you really want to talk to. Scientists, authors, explorers, people who can talk about DNA, planets, viruses, brains, bugs, whatever. But recently, we had a chance to talk to someone who's been doing exactly that, talking to scientists about all kinds of things. Flatow has been host of Science Friday on public radio for 25 years. He's written books, hosted the PBS show Newton's Apple, and you've seen the Science Friday stories on this program as well, and in fact we're going to see another one in a few minutes. He was in town in October for a presentation at the Sheldon Auditorium, so we grabbed him and sat him down. So Flatow, thanks for joining us. I've done a lot of history about people growing up in different eras, and there were people fascinated by aviation, kids fascinated by aviation in the 1920s, or by satellites in my generation, and rocket ships. Do you see that same sort of enthusiasm among young people?
Absolutely. Young people are absolutely involved in social communities. They're involved in science. They want to know stuff. And for example, people watch The Big Bang Theory. It is the most popular show on network television, and yet it's talking about four physics geeks who live together. Why is that so popular? Because people love to talk about science.
And you became a part of it.
I was on that show a couple of times. Smart is the new sexy now, and young people understand this. Not only that, but science is showing up in other aspects of show business. For example, a few years ago, you had two films about two important scientists competing for the top, Academy Award, Stephen Hawking and Alan Turing. When was the last time scientists were competing for the best award in film? You have scientists in all walks of life now being profiled in all the media. The money, and I always, having grown up in the Watergate era, when follow the money was important, you see, if you follow the money for advertisers, you see they're sinking their advertising money where science is being talked about. I couldn't believe this. The other day, I was watching a commercial. It was a woman driving a car, and the car was about buying tires for a tire company, and the woman was a scientist. They used the image of a woman. She says, she's driving now, and she doesn't want to worry about the rain and the tires, but she's thinking about science. She's a scientist heading to a meeting, and all these sciencey things flashed up on the screen. They're selling tires to a woman scientist. Can you imagine what's going on in that pitch room when they want to think of a commercial? Hey, we want to sell tires to women. Let's bring a woman scientist.
This is not a soccer mom. Nothing wrong with soccer moms, but this is not a soccer mom, right?
Yesterday, I saw an ad for a big foreign car maker featuring Stephen Hawking. I mean, people, why are they doing this? Because they realize, and their research tells them, that people are really interested in science, and if you want to reach them, you go through that science connection.
So how do we come to terms with that, and then this sense of anti-intellectualism, anti-science, science becoming political? If you believe this, you're on the left. If you believe that, you're on the right. So it seems like we're talking about a couple of different trends here.
Well, that is one of the hardest things for me to try to parse out, is when did science become so politicized? Now, we know that science was political, or it was, I guess it was religious, the religious side of it, when we've been talking about evolution ever since the Scopes trial. People have talked about whether you believe in evolution or not believe in evolution, even though scientists, it's generally accepted incontrovertibly that evolution is real. Maybe that's one time where we had a link to people's political views. If they believed in that side of the controversy, maybe they believe politically one way. And then how climate change got to be politicized, I can't think, when did that happen? Because conservationists who could have been conservative Republicans in bygone days, they all believe that we should preserve the environment. Religious groups like Baptists would tell me, we believe in preserving the environment. The Bible tells us that we are stewards of the earth and we have to take care of the environment. The only thing I can think of is when Al Gore did his book and then the film people who did not like Al Gore suddenly had an excuse not to like, not to talk about climate change or believe in climate change.
Well, let me ask you this. You wrote a book a while ago called They All Laughed, right?
Right.
And there's always within the history of science people who were rejected, ridiculed, shunned because their beliefs didn't fit the common wisdom of the scientific community. So why is it we should be rejecting that small percentage of people in climate change who say it's not happening? So I think the argument from that side would be, well, we're the people being shunned and ridiculed, and yet in the end, we will be proven right.
Well, then let's wait for them to be proven right. Science is self-correcting, and as much as you pointed out that eventually some of these other people were shown to be right, even going back to Galileo and the Vatican, let's wait for that point to happen. It hasn't happened yet. It may never happen. But as long as the majority, 97% of well-known climatologists believe that global warming is real, and you can see it with your own eyes, and the Earth is sort of talking to us about, for example, we have routes through the North Pole for ships to take that were never ever opened before in recorded history. The Earth is telling us this is real, backed by good scientific data. Then you have to accept it. If something comes up and something will overturn it, fine. Well, let's wait for that. Science is self-correcting. New data which disproves science will self-correct our current views. But so far, overwhelmingly, the science has proven that climate change and global warming is real.
And yet, there's still so many issues, so many problems that science needs to address. I think sometimes we're missing the point if we're arguing a social or political issue as opposed to a scientific issue.
But the connection there is that politics pays for science. That's the real problem of how do you walk through this carefully. I mean, Congress funds a lot of a great bulk of what science does in this country through the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. So if you have people in these committees who don't believe in the science,
or can't afford to because they're up for re-election.
Or, well, for whatever reason, either religiously, politically, don't believe in it, that science is going to get cut. I mean, as we speak, there is an effort in Congress now to defund a lot of science that these congressional people don't believe in, whether it has to do with fetal tissue research, whether it has to do with global warming. People's own beliefs, they bring their own beliefs, and they decide, well, we're going to subpoena these scientists and we're going to harass these scientists by having them present all their data, their phone calls and whatever. And that's actually going on in Congress right now. So there are efforts to intimidate scientists about the research that they do.
It's an interesting country because on the one hand, we have some of the greatest science going on in the world, and yet some very basic debates about what science is and isn't. I mean, we're at these extremes. It's an interesting place to live in.
Well, it is interesting, and while we're having these debates, there are people other countries that are really willing and able to step into our role as the greatest science research company or country in the world. China is right there creating all kinds of terrific universities and research projects, waiting to take over our space as long as we're going to sit here debating this stuff, we're not going to fund it, whatever, and China, or maybe India is on the rise, or other countries.
South Korea,
they're going to come in and just do our jobs for us if we let them do that. And we have to be vigilant if you want to keep it. Thomas Jefferson said, very famously in letters to John Adams, ignorance is the greatest threat to democracy. And as long as we try, not to get better and to stay smart, we're going to have a threat to our democracy.
You've been writing, reporting, talking about science for quite a while now. What excites you in terms of what's going on?
There's so much going on. We have trouble on Science Friday deciding what to put on the radio. Okay, here are some of the really exciting places that I think are going. The microbiome. Everything, we have so many foreign bacteria that live in our gut. I mean, with trillions and trillions of foreign bacteria living in our gut, helping us to digest food, living there, that most of the genome, most of the DNA in our body doesn't belong to us. It belongs to them. There are so many of them. And these bacteria influence all kinds of things that go on in our body. When it gets hungry, we get hungry. What does it want to eat? Well, if it's the wrong kind of bacteria, it may want us to eat unhealthy things. Maybe then it's linked to type 2 diabetes, and that's why we may be eating a lot of these unhealthy things. It's also linked to our nervous system. Maybe there are dementias or some sort of mental illnesses that are linked to the microbiome. We should know more about that. So the microbiome is very, very exciting and a great area of research. Talk about space travel. We're talking about where can we find life on our solar system. We're talking about going to the moons of Jupiter or maybe to the moons of Saturn. Arthur C. Clarke talked about this years ago and pointed out to the moons of Jupiter, let's send probes out there to look for those signs of life. So I could go on and on and on about things that are exciting.
Dr. Flatow, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.